No More Heroes is a perfect video game. I said that in my original No More Heroes video, and you know what? I still think that. Everything about it works for me, from the side missions to the overworld to the main gameplay. The story is incredibly engaging. I love the character and journey of Travis Touchdown, and despite some people claiming things like the side minigames are lame or the overworld is a negative, I personally disagree. I think that not only do those work as a break from what could have turned into repetitive hack and slash gameplay, but that they also don't detract from the game as a whole. One of the reasons for that is that every second of the game feels intentional, as if Suda51, the game's director, knew exactly how he wanted each little moment to affect the player in a specific way, and he nailed it. It's a perfect game, not just because I can't find any real flaws, but because it so perfectly hits on the director's vision that even if you didn't know who Suda51 is, you'll feel somebody's passion for odd storytelling and character writing coming through. I've seen this game as a masterpiece since I first played it, and when I originally finished it, I immediately dived into No More Heroes 2. And originally, I thought it was just as perfect as the original, and absolutely fantastic. But, as the years have passed and I've played this series more and more, I started to see cracks forming. Flaws that became more and more evident the more I played, both in story and in gameplay. I never disliked the game, and hell, as spoilers for the video, I still think it's really great, but every now and then, the game will hit you with a snag, a misunderstanding of its own mechanics, or just moments that are bad. In fact, that phrase earlier really puts how I feel into as few words as possible. No More Heroes 2 is great, but, and I feel like that phrase can apply to so many aspects of the game, as it has some really fantastic stuff that I find even better than the original. But with those things comes frustrating levels, a story with aspects that feel undercooked, and sections where the game feels tedious where the first game didn't. I've been a bit nervous to get into it, as this video has been surprisingly highly requested considering my channel's size, and I don't want to disappoint people who see this game as I saw the first game. And I also kind of find it hard to be truly able to articulate my complicated feelings on the game. And we'll get into this part a little deeper way down the line, but no, I don't think these issues are due to Suda51 taking a producer role here instead of director. This game is still filled with his influence, and I think if you play it for 5 minutes, you'll notice that immediately. Even if he showed up in the game and said, yes, this is my vision, this is what I want, these flaws would still be here, but I'm getting ahead of myself. As usual, we'll be starting with the aspects of the game I have the least to say about, then we'll end with the most complicated. We'll look at the great, the bad, and the desperate. Struggle. Because it's called, you get it. I mean, you get the joke, right? I'll explain it. See, it's actually clever because the game's name. First off, we'll start with something that I have pretty much no qualms with, which unsurprisingly for my videos at this point is the presentation. This game goes for a darker tone than the original, putting Travis and the other characters through the ringer in multiple ways. And to match that, the visuals are a bit less saturated, and the character designs tend to be a bit edgier, quite literally. Yet it still keeps its style from the first game. It's still incredibly recognizable as No More Heroes, but it has a much thicker atmosphere in both how it's shaped and how cutscenes tend to be framed. It starts as early as that opening fight with Skelter Helter. It's a snowy night with the fight only being illuminated by the light from nearby windows. Sylvia's entrance shows her the same way Travis would see her before they start sharing the screen, and she immediately dominates it. The camera moves around Skelter as he monologues, and that moment where he pulls his head off is only that impactful because of how it's framed. The game keeps that up too, despite it having a similarly budgeted feel as the first game. It feels a lot more cinematic, with tons of references to Suda's favorite films and shows without being obnoxious. Hell, that scene with Travis and Sylvia gets turned on its head later, where Travis has had enough of being pushed to kill by the UAA and Sylvia, and just screams at her, now fully making Sylvia and what she represents seem small. Yet the next day, when they have a more mature talk, dissecting the relationship, it starts with a door between them, until she enters when they finally seem to be on equal footing. It's genius. My one thing, and I know that after the Engage video, people might say I'm being over dramatic, over fan service, but what the fuck are these jiggle physics? Like that first cutscene with Sylvia, it works, as it's so heavily from Travis's perspective, and he's horny as fuck at all times. But it's literally like every woman in the game besides like Kimmy, who's a teenager, so God, I would hope not. Like, look, I don't personally hate fan service, but when I'm trying to engage with the cutscenes and every woman's tits are going fucking nuts at the slightest movement, it takes me just a little bit out of it. The solution, if you ask me, isn't even to take it out, it's to go even farther. Give the boys some attention, make their dicks very obviously flop around in their pants, just like big old bulges, and when they turn, their wieners are just flipping back and forth like nobody's business. You know, just like let them bounce up and down, you know, maybe zoom in a couple times. But yeah, this game's visuals are fantastic, even better than the first game, and the framing and lighting have seen a big upgrade. Another aspect of the game's visuals actually goes hand in hand with the next topic, which is the music. The music in this game, despite probably seeming similar to the first game to someone not familiar with the series, is actually pretty different. In the first game, the music tended to frequently change genres, always being different from fight to fight. Sometimes it was club music, sometimes it was rock, sometimes it was just electronic noises, but it never really liked to stay in one place. Meanwhile here, the music tends to be a lot more consistent. At first, I personally wasn't crazy about it, but nowadays I see how much this change adds to this game specifically. 2 keeps the style of the first game, but really focuses in on the punk rock aspects of it. See, in No More Heroes 1, the game was obviously punk rock inspired. It was basically a 90s punk rock samurai movie that took place in a fusion of modern times, the past, and the future. But here, it fully leans into that punk aesthetic and music, making that its primary stylistic inspiration in terms of action and style. You get these freeze frames after kills that have a wailing guitar, there's constant poses and moments that could be album covers, and when a fight's over, especially with those explosive endings, it makes it feel like a music video just ended. And it's with that I actually realized something pretty cool about how this game presents its visuals and music, which is that it feels like the characters themselves can hear the music playing, or at least like they're creating it. Characters in No More Heroes know they're in a video game, that much is clear, but it wasn't until this playthrough where I realized how much it feels like the characters act and move according to whatever music is playing. For example, moments are almost always silent until a fight starts, in which the music starts blaring, and what's amazing about just about every boss theme is it feels like it's happening to a rhythm. Not as in everyone moves on a beat, but more of what's happening always feels like it matches the song. Take Slingshot, the first boss theme in the whole game. By the way, can you tell I adore this game's opening? It starts off a bit quiet before exploding with guitars and drums, as if Travis is making his entrance into a wrestling ring. The song stays pretty consistent with short moments with less instruments, as you'll be stopping occasionally to read the tutorial and try out new combat techniques. Until you finish that reading and the song explodes as the battle fully starts. The new Destroy Men fight is very bad, but the music lifts it up quite a bit. It starts with one guitar playing, as you'll more than likely be focusing on only one of them, but as the fight continues and the other Destroy Men will get involved, another guitar chimes in, finishing the song. Another thing I adore is how the battle music aids in the storytelling, at least the way that I see it. The battle tracks in this game tend to represent Travis with guitar, especially loud, waily ones. It's what's played when stuff heats up, it's what plays whenever he gets a kill, and every fight ends with that guitar riff, which is the point where Travis stops fighting and it goes silent again. What I love is that guitar, at least in Travis's fights, always reflects how he's feeling, how things are going at that point in the story, and how he sees other fighters. For example, with a character like Nathan Copeland, instead of punk, you have hip-hop, as Nathan is quite literally a hip-hop artist. However, at this point in the game, not only is Travis hopped up on his desire to kill, he and Nathan both have a similar outlook on the battle. They have similar mindsets, so Travis's guitar syncs up with Nathan's beat. Now, Ryuji and Matt Helms both have the same thing, and it could fit either, but I always liked considering it more Ryuji's theme. This fight is a drag-out brawl going for hours until one of them gives up, so Travis's guitar sounds like it's carefully considering when it's time to chime in, as if Travis is trying to find his opening. And as for Matt, you could kind of see it as Travis trying to understand his opponent in general, as Matt is literally a fucking ghost. In the rematch against Let's Shake, Travis mostly has the upper hand, so his guitar never really lets up despite the electronic noise trying to break in. Kimmy's theme, A Dose of Innocence, is perfect for that fight because instead of that guitar being Travis's, it's hers. She's someone who's taking after Travis and wants to copy him, so she's got that electric guitar, but in a way that suits her personality more. Then you've got songs that come later in the game, the ones missing the guitar blaring, but for good reasons. First, there's Philistine, Margaret's theme, which is basically a complete teardown of Travis, and is just repeating to him what he's already starting to feel. And the thing is, you would expect that at some point, his guitar would blare in, like it's arguing back. But the most you hear is around halfway through, the guitar is quietly supporting the song, as if Travis is agreeing with what Margaret is saying. The reason his guitar never blares is also twofold. As for one, as I've mentioned, Travis is disillusioned, and he kind of agrees with her. And two, in the end, you find out Travis was listening so he could memorize the lyrics in order to respect Margaret in death. What he says after the fight is shown in the actual music. The guitar is quiet, as Travis is trying to listen to the song so this fight never leaves his memory. Then there's Captain Vladimir. His song uses synth and electronic sounds to push the space theme, but a good chunk in, you get Travis's guitar, not overpowering the other instruments, but propping them up, as his main goal is to bring peace to Vladimir, not tear him apart. Alice's theme is legitimately the main reason I think this guitar motif isn't just in my head, as not only does the song not have it, it wouldn't make sense if it did. Travis is over the climb to the top. He's seen the humans behind the killers, and though he still loves fighting, he's over the killing part. You see that in the climb to her. Instead of punk rock blaring as you climb, it's almost entirely silent, until a somber guitar and piano piece starts playing. Travis is done at this point, but he still needs to battle Alice. It's what she wants. And that piano ends up being the instrument that represents her, the same the guitar does for Travis. And what's amazing is, as I said before, during the boss itself, his guitar doesn't chime in, and it feels like something's missing. The drums are pounding so loud, and normally when you hear something like that in these songs, you expect that electric guitar to come in wailing as it normally does, but this time it doesn't. The drums feel out of place. Travis has no interest in tearing Alice down. He barely even wants to be around the UAA anymore, so his guitar is just nowhere to be heard. You get quiet snippets at some point, as if part of Travis still enjoys the battle, but despite it feeling like the song is begging for it, his guitar doesn't show up. And you know what? It even works for Jasper Bat Jr. It starts with the blaring of the guitar as Travis is ready to put down Jasper and what he represents for good. But as the song goes, the guitar gets cut out every now and then, until in the second phase, it transitions into a song that sounds confused. The track is fittingly called Convulsive Madness. Travis's guitar consistently being cut out, but always coming back in. Then, the final phase, you've got almost nothing but Travis's guitars and drums blasting as he finishes the job once and for all. All of this to say, No More Heroes 2's soundtrack is not the same as the first games. It's a lot more focused, but in that focus came a soundtrack that, despite not actually changing depending on the player's actions, naturally goes with the flow of what you'll be doing, not to mention how much of a story it tells. I'm not saying the original game's OST didn't tell you each character's story, far from it, but this game's story, more than anything, is about Travis, his development, and how he feels. So instead of each song specifically putting you in the atmosphere of the character you're fighting, it takes the perspective and emotions of Travis and clashes it with whoever he's fighting. It is absolutely genius, and despite being pretty different from what the first game had, I honestly might put this OST above the first because of how it immerses you. And this insane quality is of course to no surprise, because this game's music producer was Akira Yamaoka, the composer for games like Silent Hill, who is a master at telling stories through his music. Okay, so now that I've used only around 2,500 words on the small stuff that, I don't really have a lot to say about, let's talk about the actual meat and potatoes, the stuff I really want to dig into, starting with the gameplay. Now, the gameplay in No More Heroes 1 was pretty good. Nothing extraordinary, but decent hack and slash gameplay supplemented by shorter minigames and open world exploration. Here, that hack and slash gameplay has gotten a ton of refinement, with the extra stuff either improving or being sanded off, for better or worse. So let's go from least complex to most complex. The open world is gone, now replaced with a menu to which you can simply select where you want to go, and you're there. And honestly, I think I'm cool with it. Here's the thing. I know it's controversial to feel one way or the other about this game ditching riding around on the bike, but personally, as long as the game is built around it, I have no problems. The original game was built around that open world travel. It helped add to both the absurdity of the game, but also the mundanity of Travis's normal life. You had to drive from your shitty apartment to your part-time job to pay a massive fine, then you got to pretend to be a badass for a little bit. It never detracted from the game for me, only enhanced it. Here, not only is the context a little bit different, but requirements for levels are also different. This game does explore Travis's weird mundane life, but it's much more about his need for revenge and his constant bloodlust. Not only that, but for the most part, it's revealed that Sylvia, the main person taking that cash, is on his side this time, so constantly having to pay massive sums of cash and driving around to emphasize how much of a scam was being run on Travis isn't really needed anymore. And while yes, I didn't dislike the open world in the first game, I liked it quite a bit, I also personally don't mind this game's more snappy pace. Near the end of the game, driving back and forth to the same jobs to buy that last beam katana and the pink jacket got pretty tedious for me. But here, if you want cash, you just click which minigame you want to play, and that's that. Speaking of which, I actually really like these minigames. Instead of being short button presses, they're fleshed out into these short NES style games where it's more about replaying for a higher score than repeatedly playing over and over again just for the money. The pipe one is fucking stupid, but I've always had fun with the others. I think that what this game lacks in immersing you in its world like the first game did, it makes up for in just how fun these games can be. I spent way too long mastering the Exterminator minigame. In the steak one, once you get it down, you feel like a genius who can never fail. The tile minigame is, fuck, did that one? No. Okay, no, so that one did, damn it, what am I supposed to, okay, see, there we go, that was pretty easy. The space trash one, if you die right before finishing, gives you around $100,000, so it's the go-to for making a ton of money. I think what's so fun about these is that despite being so short, you feel like you could spend a ton of time figuring out how to optimize them, because they really do nail that feeling of old score-based NES and arcade titles like Donkey Kong and the like. As someone who enjoys most of the minigames in the first game and never found them intrusive, having new versions that are just more fun in more unique ways is just a straight upgrade if you ask me. That includes the gym too. I actually prefer these short spurts of timing games over the button mashing of the original. And that button mashing is still there, but now it's to help Travis's cat lose weight. And as a cat lover, the different ways he talks to Jean and plays with her are legitimately just really cute. So yeah, the overworld isn't actually that much of a deal breaker for me. But what I will say is because you don't need to pay cash for new assassin fights, because you'll have more than likely purchased everything in the katana shop before long, you kind of lose a reason outside of getting close to play the job minigames after you get like number 10 in the ranks. You might want a new jacket or pants, but if you don't care about those clothes, then other than the few revenge missions, which I'll get into in a second, there's no real reason to go through this menu anymore. Sure, you can do the 2 minutes of training minigames, but after that, I never feel any reason to do anything other than click on the next ranked fight. And that actually shows an issue that I said would have shown up in the original game to actually happen. This game turns into nothing but hacking and slashing, and because of that, it can get pretty stale. Even if you do those revenge missions, those are just more enemies to kill. I get that the game wants you to see its violence as senseless, but the fact that it becomes all you're doing for the last 3 to 4 hours of playtime makes the endgame really tiring, and I don't think that was necessarily on purpose. Not to say the combat gameplay in this game is bad, far from it actually. It's still no God of War or Devil May Cry, but it already had a good baseline in the first game, and all they did here was improve upon what already was and flesh it out. Instead of high and low attacks being just that, they're also light and heavy attacks, which can all be really fun to weave in between to get long combos. Think your katana takes too long to swing? Throw in some melee attacks. They don't do as much damage, but used alongside your katana, they can stagger enemies for grapples and easy kills. My favorite addition, and what I would call the best addition, is that you no longer just upgrade your katana to new models. You have 4 different ones you can swap to anytime, and I'd argue they're all useful for different situations throughout the entire game. The starting Bloodberry will more than likely be your least used, as it's the most bog standard, but it does its job plenty well. And if you don't think you have the exact answer for a scenario, it's still worth using. The Camellia Mark III is especially useful for bosses that move a ton like Nathan, as it has faster combos that can get more damage if you can get those hits in. But if you're struggling to get a lot of hits in per opening, try the Peony, one of my personal favorites. It is incredibly slow, but it hits like a truck, and the more damage you do, the longer its range gets. And you can still throw in those melee attacks. Eventually, when you get the Rose Nasties though, I would honestly say the other swords become secondary use. Still legitimately useful in the right scenarios, but most of the time nothing matches how much damage the Rose Nasties do at their speed. Plus, when you charge them, you're jerking off 2 dicks at once. And don't even look at me and tell me that that's not what you wanted to do when you played the first game. You can't even deny it. You can't even look me in the eye and say you don't want to jerk off 2 dicks at once. Look at him go, jerking off those dicks. And I know that you want to do it too.
You want to learn from Travis Touchdown. You want to jerk off 2 dicks at once.
That said, this doesn't mean that the Rose Nasties are the end-all be-all. After all, this game adds multiple new enemy types, ones with katanas, ones with chainsaws, and most of them with a lot more health. Even with the Rose Nasties, if you're surrounded by beefy enemies, yeah, you'll have that single target damage, but you'll struggle with the crowd control. So maybe you should switch over to the Peony. It'll shred multiple health bars incredibly quickly. Then once they're done, you can just switch back. Or another example, yes, the Rose Nasties do the most damage, if both blades hit. See, if a boss moves around a lot or has a shield, you realistically might only get 1 hit in with one of the swords. That happened to me with Captain Vladimir, so you know what I did? I switched back to the stock Bloodberry. Sure, it is the weakest, but the wide swings of the Peony would hit the shield, and the Rose Nasties could only get one of the blades to hit, but the Bloodberry swung more vertically than any other katana, and it worked. I think that's what I love about this game's combat system the most, is that it has that depth that the original game tended to lack. Yeah, most of the original game's fun came from the boss battles and working around them, but when it came to how you actually approached and attacked, it would always be the same. Here, you're encouraged to make your own strategy, and that's fantastic. But it doesn't save it from getting tedious. Look, I get that people didn't like the parts of the original game that weren't action-based, but getting rid of the money requirements means that there's no reason to engage with the in-between content. And this game's gameplay just doesn't hold my attention for 3 to 4 hours with no breaks. Obviously, you can, and you probably should, take breaks in real life, but that's not what I mean. What I mean is that there's no real reason to not just start that next level, as if you aren't interested in getting new clothes, you may as well just do the training then jump right back into the main gameplay. But that's my problem. No More Heroes combat gameplay is meant to coexist with other gameplay styles. It's meant to be one part of a greater whole, but by the halfway point in this game, it is the whole, and it's just not built for that. There's no strategy like in Dynasty Warriors, no long combo strings like Devil May Cry. It's just the same type of gameplay over and over and over with these enemy gauntlets, and it can be exhausting. And yes, for one of these levels, that's on purpose, and I love that level, and we'll get to it. But in the others, you can't convince me these weren't tedious on accident. Take them all. At first you notice, oh, it's a massive gauntlet in the parking lot, that's pretty neat, but then the 5th wave passes, and then the 6th, and then the 12th, and you were ready for the boss ages ago, and none of these enemies have been difficult, and at this point you're over it, but they just keep coming. Most levels have this problem. They tend to not be full areas, just a couple rooms with way too many enemy spawns one after another. Again, this was a thing in the first game, but here I just went from one to the next without ever needing to stop. I guess you can do the revenge missions in between, but like I said, these are more enemy gauntlets, so the tedium doesn't really wear off. But there is also other characters. That's a pretty good idea. The first game introduced some really badass supporting characters, so to play as Shinobu and Henry, the 2 most popular, is legitimately awesome. But these levels are honestly pretty undercooked. Shinobu gets 2, and both levels are honestly pretty lame. When they require you to jump, I want to die, as her controls are just so stiff and frustrating, and her combat with standard enemies is just a stiffer version of Travis's. That's disappointing too, because I think if you tweaked her, she could be a ton of fun to play as, but in terms of her level design, it's a less interesting Travis, as you only have one weapon, and the only unique thing it has is a projectile that isn't even that good against standard goons. Henry gets one boss, no level, and that's it, which is honestly a decent segue. Let's talk about how the bosses play. These bosses are really great, even better than the first game a lot of the time. But there's also multiple bosses that aren't just worse than in the first game, they are straight up awful. But since I want to be nice, let's start with my personal favorites. Skelter Helter is an amazing first boss. He's aggressive, he has range, but he's not so difficult that he can't be overcome. He is an amazing lesson on just how much more active bosses in this game will be, as he has more diverse moves than most of the late bosses in the first game. Can you tell I really like this game's opening? Let's Shake is simple, but I really like how it kind of feels like a fight from the first game, with simpler strategies and only a few unique attacks. Fits considering he was snatched in the first game. Kimmy Howell is great. Not crazy hard, but just enough varied attacks to give you a challenge. She takes advantage of having slightly better range than you, and it's mostly about learning her simple attack patterns and punishing accordingly. Ryuji has this really awkward sumo at the beginning that... but then the actual fight is legitimately great. He's got really fast and powerful attacks and can summon the dragon that Darkstar was going to use before he got usurped. Honestly, I find this fight to be similar to the Jean fight. It's close quarters against an enemy with fast attacks, strong defense, and an insane super move. Henry only gets the one fight, but he's so fun to play that I wish he wouldn't blue ball me. He's got an insane dash, a ridiculously spammable projectile, and some of the slickest high damage combos in the game. The fact that his moveset is this cool and yet only gets this one fight is legitimately disappointing, especially because he does 3 fights off screen. And just a real quick aside, this game does that a lot, saying that you're going to have this many fights but then cutting them out for a joke. It's funny the first time, it's honestly even funnier the second time with Let's Shake, but by the third time I'm not only not laughing, but the fact that I missed out on multiple Henry fights is again pretty disappointing.
Would you fucking people stop stealing my kills?
Margaret and Vladimir are both fantastic. Margaret having very long range but having much fewer options up close, meaning her fight is about slowly closing that gap and stacking as much damage as you can before she makes that gap again. And Vladimir has massive AoE attacks and a shield, yet also doesn't move much, so it's much more about your positioning than actually going on the attack. And then there's Alice, the best fight in the game, and one of the best in the whole series. She has a ton of attacks, she dodges a ton, and she hits like a truck, but it never feels overwhelming or unfair. It's about mastering every option you have in order to take any effectiveness her attacks had away, and by the end of it, you won't be getting touched, but it's that struggle to learn her moves, figuring out her range, reacting when that range gets extended, and only attacking when you know you're safe that makes the fight. It is the perfect No More Heroes boss, and it's the one I point to when giving an example of what this game's combat is all about. I truly think that this game really took what the original game's bosses could do and just evolved them completely. Even the more dull bosses still are either memorable by gimmick, like the one against the homunculus lady, who I can't remember the name of, or Squilliam Fancy Son, who's the only good Shinobu boss out of the two. And in the end, all of the bosses are just fun to learn, and the game really nailed them. But for all the good bosses this game has, it has 2 that are so fucking awful that even though I have played this game multiple times now, they tend to fog up my memory of how consistently great the bosses are in this game. Not always, but when I say this game falls short of being perfect, these 2 bosses are some of the biggest culprits. The game can be tedious, sure, and its story has a couple problems that we'll get into, but New Destroyman and Jasper Bat Jr. are atrocious. New Destroyman feels like it wasn't in the oven long enough. The idea of fighting 2 bosses while playing as a more agile, on paper, character like Shinobu sounds cool, but all this fight actually does is waste your time. The only one of the 2 that is even remotely easy to fight is the close range one, as if you try to take down the range one first, the close range one will just hop on over and cheap shot you. But if you decide to focus down the close range one, have fun getting pot shot every 10 seconds by the far away Destroyman with no way of punishing him or even seeing him half the time. Then once the close range one is down, the fight becomes a complete waste of your time. Since you're focused on him, the long range Destroyman probably will never hit you. But every time you finally get to him with Shinobu's stupid ass jumping, he's already moved far away and you've got to run all the way back. Yeah, you have your projectile, but not only is it pretty finicky, it doesn't do that much damage, so you have to spam it forever. The best strategy is just to chase him until he tries to revive the other one, to which you can then wail on him and take a couple of slices of health away. However, doing this over and over again takes upwards of 15 minutes, and none of it is fun. It's either frustrating or boring. And you already knew I was going to mention Jasper Bat Jr. He is the most hated boss in the series for a reason, and it is just because he's broken. The first phase is fine, nothing complicated, you hit him when you can. But that second phase, if you told me this was playtested thoroughly, I would point you out as the biggest liar I have ever met, because this shit does not work. His teleporting is impossible to predict. And yes, I know you can dodge it, and I have, but if you aren't prepared for it the second he does it, that's 3 hits, sometimes more, that do crazy damage. And later on, he starts doing it with range attacks, to which dodging is so precise that I don't think it's possible to consistently do it. And if he decides that that's the only move he's gonna use, game over. You can't do anything about it. And to insult you even more, there's the fucking windows. If he does any of those moves near a window, instant kill. Try again and hope he doesn't do it a second or third or fourth time, because it really is just if he decides to do it or not. Yes, you can ration health. Yes, you can eventually consistently beat it. And yes, you can avoid the windows, but it still sucks either way the second you slip up against the dumbass teleport. I've fought this guy many times, and yet each time I die to that dumbass ranged teleport, each time I fall out the window, part of me always considers putting the game down there and considering it done, because it's just irritating. The third phase, who gives a shit? You basically have to take damage to hit him, but unless he spams his mouth lasers over and over, he won't really out damage you in the War of Attrition. But that second phase is so broken, and I would honestly say it brings the game's score down multiple notches, because you have to consider, gameplay wise, that the bosses are the main meat of the game. If multiple were mediocre, that'd be bad, but to have 2 be outright awful is disappointing. It's not game ruining, but it's one of the main snags holding this game back. I'm not kidding, they really are that bad. But maybe Rule of Rose made me reconsider how bad a boss could be, but this playthrough, the good bosses really shine through more than the bad for me. I think the bad ones do sour the experience, especially in hindsight, as I feel the bad memories can outweigh the good. But with the game fresh in my mind, is New Destroyman really so bad that it outweighs how good Ryuji is? Is Jasper really so awful that it outshines the Alice fight? No. I don't think so. I don't want to give off the impression that this game is bad or even not great. It's just that unlike the first game, it has more obvious negative points that really stick out like sore thumbs. I think this game is so good that those negative parts, like the bad bosses or the tedium of it all, can feel more noticeable because everything surrounding them is so good that the bad seems like the most obvious thing. I hate those 2 bosses, but this game is still really fucking good. And one of the best things about it, I've referred to a couple times, but I haven't even fully dived into yet. So let's talk about the story. A lot of people would sum up this game's story as a simple revenge bad narrative. Others would also claim that it's ham-fisted commentary on how sick it is that players love violence in video games so much, and if you think about it, they're no betters than the psychos in the game. However, I would argue that both of these outlooks on the game are wrong. The reason I think that is twofold. For one, I don't think this game can really be simplified into a message to tell, and 2, because like the first game, this game is a deep dive on Travis Touchdown, his violent nature in the world the story takes place in. It isn't a commentary on gamers or revenge. It's a commentary on its own fictional world and the fictional characters that inhabit it, and most of all, if you ask me, it's a deconstruction of the theme that runs through so much of Suda's work, that being killing the past. I'm not going to pretend that it's an easy thing to understand. After all, I think you only really see it if you, of course, played the first game, but also have experienced other Suda 51 titles, such as Killer 7, or hell, No More Heroes 3. And I know that a lot of people discount what this game brings to the table due to the idea that Suda wasn't involved with this game as he was with the others. But the way this story is told, the way it's written, and the way it deconstructs Travis are so tied to the series that I don't believe the idea that Suda wasn't the main contributor to this story. It's messy, it's edgy, and it is incredible. So let's dig in. First off, I love the way that this game uses its fourth wall breaks and acknowledgements of the characters knowing they're in a video game to keep its main plot in motion.
How about you fill us in on everything that's happened since the last game? We're not going to be satisfied until you do, right?
The fact that the UAA was a scam in the last game, that's not a thing here. It's real. Why? Well, we could use a crazy example of, well, since assassins are a thing in this universe, maybe they thought the scam should be real. But no, it worked being fake in the last game, but here, it would work a lot better if it was real. You get a structure, a big bad, and Sylvia's return all in one package. It's real because the plot needs it to be real now, and nobody questions it. Why exactly did Travis dip out? How did he fall from greatness? It'd take too long to explain. He's at the bottom again. Makes it easier this time.
There are people starting from the sequel who don't care about continuity, you know. Besides, it would take forever if I recapped every detail of your fall from greatness. Players would skip it. It's so boring.
The fact that this game's revenge mission is started because of some random person we killed that Travis doesn't even remember because it was in the opening cutscene, not in gameplay, is also absolutely perfect. In fact, time to get into how perfect that opening is.
It's called fashionably late fuckface.
It starts with both Travis and honestly Skelter Helter interacting like characters did in the first game. A comedic tone, an immediate over-the-top fight, and a decapitation. A fantastic reintroduction to the series. Then we get Sylvia's reintroduction, which I love because we just saw her recounting the story in a shady strip club. So she's clearly fallen on some kind of hard times, but here, she's straight up in a higher position than she was last time. She and Travis are still shooting the shit, being toxic right off the bat with the exact same offer of sex if Travis gets to number 1. Until...
Hey! We're not done yet. I've got a message for you.
everything stops. The game falls into its new tone as Skelter explains exactly what he's going to put Travis through, not only for his own revenge, but because that's just how assassins work. You kill someone close to someone else, and they'll join the ranks to find you. It's how Travis got into the ranks in the last game, and it's now how he's going to get back in, whether he wants to or not. Also, immediately, the tone is changed by how Robin Atkin-Down voices Travis. It's still over the top, still fantastic.
Seriously? I cut off your head?
But I remember when I first played, there's this one line.
Well, who's been a brother to you?
What?
I know this is so stupid, but I feel like that what is said more serious than literally anything he said in the first game. He knows the exact type of people Skelter is referring to, so when he gets his best friend's head in the mail, though it's probably expected, it changes nothing. And then you get that moment of Skelter tearing his own head off. This fully cements how this game is going to play with its tone. This, in other contexts, would be either really silly or potentially chilling, and yet in this game, it's a little bit of both. It has that over-the-top gore we've come to expect, but it's not played as extravagant or hilarious, just silent and unsettling, with nobody having anything to say afterwards. That tone is geniusly balanced throughout the game as well. Serious moments don't feel like cliches or have a comedic edge like a lot of the more serious moments the first game had. They're played straight. When Travis finds out Bishop is dead, the game doesn't make jokes about it. It doesn't fourth wall break. Travis's call to Sylvia is perfect, and despite a lot of their relationship going back to that constant teasing with Sylvia fucking Travis over for lulz, here, instead of getting the fight he wants, she stops him and meets him to talk face to face to try to calm him down. Again, no jokes, no humorous cut-in.
Makes no difference, really.
Well, besides that one, but that's from Jasper, and we'll get to why that works. It shows that while yes, this game is still No More Heroes, it's not going to be the same, which is where I really want to get into Travis now. Travis in the first game does have an arc. It's one that can be hard to see, but it is an arc. Travis sees what his path of violence can turn him into, sees that others at the top don't share his code of honor, and is disgusted by it. But when it came to his revenge on Jean, he puts all of that to the back burner in order to finally kill his past. But time keeps moving. Life keeps going. He was a target at number 1 and wanted out, and that's where it left him. Here, one way or another, he succeeded and got out. His bloodlust is still there, and he still enjoys fighting, but being number 1 doesn't matter to him anymore. Until, of course, Sylvia's back in the picture, and even more after that, once it becomes about revenge. Travis in this game changes much more obviously throughout. At first, he's going through the motions again, getting kill after kill, enjoying the fights and letting that festering bloodlust fully explode. But by the end of the game, he's kind of over it. Santa Destroy is now built off what Travis is doing. People wanting revenge, wanting to reach the top so no one can hurt them anymore, and proving that they've killed their past, yet it never works. This game is a lot more obvious with Travis's parallels to other killers. The first game wasn't necessarily subtle, but this one's got neon signs basically screaming at Travis to learn from this. Early on, people want to be like Travis. They idolize him, and he revels in it, thinking it'll just get him better battles. But then he meets someone like Kimmy Howell. Kimmy Howell is Travis, not entirely, but she's so similar to him that he's uncomfortable with it. He isn't even willing to kill her, saying if she wants to fight him again, she can, but you get the feeling this was a bit of a wake-up call, that even if he doesn't kill someone's family, just by doing what he's doing, he's creating more of himself. However, Travis doesn't fully see his bloodlust for the negative that it is until his fight with Ryuji. Ryuji is portrayed, like the other assassins, as a parallel to Travis, except here, it's Travis's honor and love of battle. It is an intense fight, as I mentioned before, played out over this intense sunset, dragging on until as they stand to clash one more time, Ryuji gives up. I love this moment where Travis realizes he's won and lets out this insane guttural scream of victory. This is the part that Travis loves. It's not the killing necessarily, but pushing himself against someone on his level. He even realizes this, and he goes to help Ryuji up, more than likely so he can get stronger and... well, this is the real wake-up call. There's no honor among the people he's decided to surround himself with. It's he and the other assassins' job to murder each other for spectacle. Everything else is secondary. After this, Travis begins to outwardly disrespect Sylvia and the UAA and begins trying to fight more on his own terms. Instead of just killing Margaret and leaving, he memorizes her song, complimenting her and giving her a second of peace before she dies. What I see this as is Travis isn't just killing and forgetting these assassins anymore. He refuses to let them die in the past and is willing to take their memory with him, going against his entire quest in the first game and going against the theme of Suda's work. With Captain Vladimir, he refuses to let him be gathered up by the association after his death, freeing him from the delusion he was stuck in for years and letting him go in peace, respected. And then there's all of the Alice chapter. Travis takes a silent walk through the alley, passing a massive wall painted in his image, celebrating how amazing people think he is, and he ignores it. As he kills wave after wave of enemies, the game instills in you this feeling of it just not mattering anymore. And I'm reminded of a character that Travis despised in the first game. That being Bad Girl. Bad Girl was a killing-obsessed psychopath who was completely disillusioned with her assassin lifestyle. She saw no more honor in it. She didn't see herself or the others as warriors, just idiots all roped in the same situation. None any better than the others, killing because that's all they know how to do anymore. Travis was this early on in the game. After Bishop's death, all he wanted was to stack up bodies, eventually becoming numb to it as the game went. None of it mattered. The daily grind, something he had to do. After all, he has to do it, right? How else is he going to move on? Well, it's with Alice that he finally puts his foot down and says, no. Before the fight, we see that Alice is burning photos, more than likely photos of her past, literally doing the most obvious and on-the-nose version of killing the past you can do. And afterwards, Alice and Travis basically do the No More Heroes version of bowing respectfully to one another. After that best boss fight in the game, Alice asks Travis to remember her, and instead of a one-liner, instead of a snarky comment, he simply agrees, and the battle ends the way that it has to. The scene where Travis yells at Sylvia is seen by a lot of people as a little lame, too on the nose, too preachy. Not saying that people don't love it, they do, but what a lot of people feel is that they're being screamed at like this is their fault, they're the problem. But what you need to understand is that Travis isn't yelling at the player. He's separating himself from the world he's stuck in, from what the UAA wants. It's him saying that he's done wasting his time killing for the sake of a corrupt system, and instead he is going to fight for himself and the people he cares about. He's separating himself from what the game's plot tells him to do and what the game expects him to be. In both the original game and in this one, we see Travis's murder quest as cool and fun, and so does he. But once he sees that he's become exactly like Sylvia, exactly like the UAA, seeing killing as just a thing he does and revenge as his epic quest concluding, he's done. He's gonna take down Jasper his way, not as some officiated match, not to be number one, and he's doing it not just for Bishop, but for all of the other assassins manipulated by the situation Jasper controls. This is also where we get his arc with Sylvia finally ending, but we'll get to that in a bit. For now, I would like to talk about Jasper himself. Jasper Bat Jr. is a horrid boss fight, but unironically, he's a perfect final boss for this game. A lot of people claim that this game is trying to tell players, oh, this is what you wanted. You wanted to kill those people but not have consequences. But not only is that not the message, the person spouting those exact words is this asshole. Jasper is a pathetic, whimpering little thing that tries to be the one to tell Travis that actually, all this killing just creates more killers, and you'll have to deal with the retribution. When he's literally the one sponsoring all of it. And he's literally just as guilty as Travis is. He calls Travis naive for fighting to avenge Bishop when the entire reason Bishop died was because of his fighting to avenge his family. His family, by the way, that he can't even be bothered to mention by name. Have you ever noticed that? He simply says,
Not only did you murder my father, but my two brothers as well.
Meanwhile, when Travis retorts, he doesn't just say, my best friend, he says Bishop's name.
Don't ever compare
pair Bishop with your shithead family.
Because he actually gives a shit. Jasper is the equivalent of that meme saying, "Oh, but you participate in society. Curious. I am very intelligent." He's pathetic not only from a writing standpoint, but in terms of the game's theme. The game is saying you can't kill the past. You can get revenge, but you'll always be facing the repercussions of what you've done and what's come before you. You can either carry the past with you and learn from it, or pretend to delete it and face the repercussions. Yet Jasper wants to spout that lesson while not learning any of it himself, pretending that he's the only one exempt from it. Meanwhile, Travis, who's accepted that you can't kill the past, isn't just fighting for Bishop. He's carrying the wills and names of all of the assassins Jasper had taken advantage of, and is going to be carrying them into the future. This game's ending pushes that too, with Travis finding Sylvia and the two of them moving into the future together, neither part of the UAA, and both of them done running from the past, instead wanting to simply just create a better future together for Sand to destroy. Speaking of which, similar to the first game, Travis's relationship with Sylvia is a major part of the game's core. However, this time it's not the story of Travis getting led along by a scam artist who dips despite potential feelings. Here, Sylvia's interactions with Travis are almost entirely her being in his corner. But because Travis's quest isn't about her anymore, he honestly doesn't seem to have any real feelings anymore a lot of the time. And that actually gets acknowledged later on. Sylvia starts the game teasing Travis like before, but upon hearing about Bishop, she goes out of her way to begin helping Travis climb the ranks. She constantly gives him info he needs. She hires Shinobu to kill other ranked members while Travis is in
A battle royale.
Fortnite?
Battle Royale.
Fortnite? And yet, despite all of this help, Travis just straight up isn't interested. In fact, he starts getting straight up pissed at her. See, Travis and Sylvia's relationship in the first game is depicted as two people who are similar in more ways than they'd like to admit, yet also demonstrably make each other worse and enable each other's worst aspects. Here, that's still true. Sylvia wants Travis to fight, not just for Bishop, but because it's a way to rope Travis back into her life. As long as he's climbing the ranks, even if it's not for her necessarily, she's got him in her life, and despite how she acted in the first game, she obviously can't really stay away from him. It's why she points out that she divorced Henry, why she stopped Travis and Henry from killing each other. Despite the many red flags and alarm bells, she can't let Travis go. Travis, on the other hand, goes from seeing her as an object to claim to the living, breathing embodiment of the UAA. She parrots their talking points, emphasizing how honor is dead and the point is just to kill each other, and pushes all of these rules on Travis. But as Travis begins to fight back against it all, and she can't really have fun taunting him with her position, she starts to fold. I love the beginning of the scene with the speech because she knows what's coming. She knows she's potentially going to lose Travis forever and that Travis is right. But if she disagrees, that's everything she has gone. Her position, her money, she'd be trading it just to make this fucking loser feel validated. And you see just how numb she is to the UAA shit, quite literally, as she doesn't flinch from being burned. And it kind of feels like the end of the line for their relationship. And in that next phone call, it's very clinical. Very, hey, your next job is here. Until you see that she's making it from outside Travis's door. She made her choice. She made her objectively stupid, idiotic choice. But just for that one interaction, you finally see why these two work so well for one another. Yes, they can bring out each other's worst, but as we see in this game, they can make each other a little more human. And that's kind of beautiful as far as a game this fucked up and weird is. And I remember after seeing her catch Travis, thinking that, oh man, they're finally together. We waited for... Wait, she dips again. Like, what the fuck? Did she go back on her choice? And we actually have had the answer for the full game. No. Throughout the game, we see Sylvia in a rundown strip club, reminiscing about her time before she lost everything, recounting Travis's story, talking about her depression. It's really odd. Until you see the actual story and realize, oh, she quit the UAA and lost everything. At first, I wondered why she left Travis, but I think the answer is obvious if you remember what I said earlier. She makes Travis worse, and I feel like in her mind, if she went back to him immediately without substantially changing herself, she'd damage him more, take away from that bright future he's growing. But in the end, realistically, trying to find herself didn't happen magically. She ended up working a shitty job in a hopeless situation. But again, it's made her more human. She's no longer a weird, impossible representation of a corporation. She is just a human. As fucked up as that is. And when Travis finally finds her, they're both ready to go back home and complete each other. Something they couldn't have done if they didn't go on their respective journeys, if they both didn't learn that killing their past would be impossible. And I've mentioned that phrase quite a bit. Like, if you did a drinking game on how many times I've said it, you'd probably be dead by now. But now I'm gonna quickly get into that. Kill the past is a major theme throughout the majority of Suda51's work, including Obviously, No More Heroes. However, as I've stated, No More Heroes 2 takes a different approach to it than the first game did, where 1 was about Travis killing his past, 2 is about how in the end, it's impossible, and how we need to learn from our past and keep moving. What's integral to this is it isn't just Travis's interactions with the other assassins or Sylvia, but with other returning characters from the first game. Hell, even the ones he doesn't meet. For the obvious examples, we have the ones that are assassins, Destroy Man and Let's Shake. Let's Shake is so obsessed with revenge and so upset that he got Fake Out killed that he goes out of his way to freeze Henry and kill every other assassin in the
Battle Royale.
Fortnite! Yet, where does his attempt to kill the past get him? Yep. Then there's Destroy Man, so insistent on killing his past that he wants to murder Shinobu just to make Travis angry. He's doubled himself up so he doesn't lose again, yet in the end, because he refused to change and focused only on deleting the bad parts of his past, he's killed by Shinobu, the assassin ranked below him before. And what I love about this is that this isn't Shinobu killing her past. In fact, throughout this game, she does the opposite. She aims to learn from Travis, and in doing so, she overcomes a challenge she couldn't before. And in the end, instead of getting pissy that Travis isn't interested in her, she keeps her head held high and keeps going, still his friend. Henry also doesn't have the desire to kill his past. Yet. Instead, he decides to put the past behind him and aid Travis. He doesn't really have an arc. He's there to be funny and keep the tone up, along with showing Travis's growth. But he himself hasn't tried to kill his past, so he's not really punished for it or rewarded for learning. But outside of that, the fact that Travis does have people in his corner now, people who want to aid him to avenge Bishop and to escape the cycle the UAA puts people in, is proof that the past doesn't need to be killed. It needs to be learned from. And if you kill your past, those experiences, those bonds you've built, fall by the wayside. Travis doesn't let that happen, and the people close to him are really what drive his arc forward. This is proved by when he thinks they've all been murdered, instead of losing control and going on another rampage, his response is to yell, "Enough!" Because again, he's done trying to sever ties. He's going to let them matter, and he's going to end the person who's perpetuating all of this suffering. This game's story is incredibly well-rounded for Travis. It fully pushes him from the same pathetic loser we saw before to someone with actual honor, with comrades he cares about, and with a fat-ass cat who is fat-ass no more. It's a fantastic story, one that does a lot of things better than the original. But it comes at the cost of those other assassins. I'm sorry, but most of these guys just aren't memorable outside of what they mean for Travis. Most of them aren't as memorable as characters like Dr. Peace or Bad Girl, and while yes, Skelter Helter, Alice, Margaret, and Vladimir are all pretty great, I tend to find the others either unmemorable or just forget them altogether. There are so few enemies in this game whose names I remember upon replay. I could name just about every assassin from 1, but here, I had to Google their names constantly when writing this script just to make sure I didn't get them wrong. Like, I'm sorry, Fishnet Lady and Squilliam Fancy Son don't do it for me like the assassins in the first game did.
I hear you're playing the cash register now.
Not helping is that multiple characters from the first game show up and are most of the time a lot more memorable than the new guys. Again, they're amazing for the purpose of developing Travis, being a dark reflection of what he could be, what he was, and what he is, but on their own, they don't stick out in my memory much, which is a shame after the majority of assassins in the first game both reflected Travis and managed to be memorable characters. A lot of people really love No More Heroes 2. I should know. People don't usually request videos from me due to my channel size, but more people than with just about any other game or series requested this one from me. Yet despite that, I still see the reception of this game as a little mixed. And I think part of that is the outright flaws that this game has that the first one didn't. But I also think people might be biased against it due to Suda51's limited involvement. Again, Suda was a producer in this game, not the director. Quick correction, Suda51, while he was a producer on this game, was actually its executive director. What that means is that basically the game's main director comes to him with questions and he gives a yes or no on many of the game's aspects. I wasn't wrong calling him the producer, but he was also the executive director and he also still wasn't the head director. I have been working on this video too long. So I feel like people might think it just doesn't display his style as much as his other work. But first of all, none of his games are made only by him. There's always going to be other hands adding things in, and 2, I don't think that if you look at this game, and especially its story the way that I have, you can think that Suda wasn't super involved with it. It is oozing with what made the original great while making honest attempts to push both the game and the characters in it forward. And I think for the most part, it succeeds. And I'm not going to pretend its flaws are just because Suda wasn't the director this time. No More Heroes 2 trips up a lot more than 1 or even 3 do, but it only trips because it's pushing forward so hard. It's a sequel to a game that wasn't meant to have one. And that That fact should have absolutely spelled disaster, but this game is still exceptionally good. I feel like despite all my gushing, people will think that because of those negative sections, I might not love this game, which couldn't be further from the truth. This game not only tries, but succeeds at expanding on what the original was trying to be without losing the insane creativity the original had. It is still an incredibly special game that I have played just as much as the original. Seriously, there hasn't been a single time that I've played through the first game where I didn't immediately boot up the second right after. Despite its flaws and despite its snags, and those are some big fucking snags, this game is still one of my favorites and is a more than worthy sequel to No More Heroes. It's a game that, despite personally being my least favorite of the three main games, I haven't played Travis Strikes Again, I will eventually, and it'll get a video when I do. I've been able to talk on and on about it for currently, let me check, 10,000 words and 14 pages, and this voiceover unedited is currently an hour and 15 minutes. Jesus Christ. It's not perfect, but it is still No More Heroes, and it's still, in my heart of hearts, a masterpiece. Jesus Christ, this is my longest video. And it's one I've been a little worried about releasing because I feel like it's one that has a lot of expectations on it. Sure, that original video isn't crazy in terms of its reception, but it's one that has gotten a lot of requests for a sequel, and I don't think I'm gonna have another video where I feel this kind of expectation until I make one on Mother 3. I don't want to disappoint people, and I'm worried that people could be mad, think I was too nice or overly critical. After all, I had nothing but positives to say about the original, and here I'm back and forth on things I like and dislike. But that's because that's how I see the game. It's great, fantastic even, but it's pretty flawed, more so than both 1 and 3, and despite my love for it, I feel like it'd be disingenuous to not dump out my full feelings on it here. I hope it was satisfactory, and I hope that if you dislike No More Heroes 2 for the reason I mentioned before, maybe you'll give it another shot. Maybe you'll see the good stuff that I see. But for now, this video is finally over, and I am never coming back.